Hey, what's going on, everyone? Greg here, and there's been a lot of talk recently about perhaps a last minute addition to the iPhone lineup in a way where Apple would be expanding their lineup not only upwards with the iPhone 14 this year, but kind of downwards towards the cheaper end of the spectrum. And you probably know what I'm talking about. That is rumors that Apple is actually going to release a $200 iPhone. And historically, if you look at iPhone prices, you can actually find, iPhone prices that kind of debuted lower with like the iPhone 5C. I believe that was $99, but that was $99 on a contract with a lot of strings tied to it. The phones were subsidized. You were paying more monthly for that phone. So it really wasn't a $99 phone. And then other iPhones obviously used to retail at $200. Again, though, with that carrier contract. The rumors that we are hearing is that Apple will be introducing a new iPhone SE. It's going to have the A15 chip in it. It's going to have 5G, and that is going to replace the current iPhone SE and, be the same price point at $400. But the surprising part of all this is that Apple may actually keep the existing iPhone SE around. That's the iPhone that has the A13 chip inside of it, and it will probably have the same exact design as this rumored new iPhone SE. So the same iPhone 8 body styling, still gonna have those bigger bezels, still gonna have the Touch ID home button, but it will be $200. Now, it won't have 5G or anything like that. Again, it's the same exact iPhone, but that would technically be Apple's cheapest iPhone unlocked ever in the entire lineup. And it got me thinking a lot. I was even wondering, what would this phone really be like? Because I think if you ask most tech people or just people who are watching this in general, if they would be interested in a iPhone SE, I think most people, at least in my audience, would probably say no. They're not interested in these lower end phones. But I also think that there might be potentially an untapped market here because we have not seen Apple enter into the phone market, or really a lot of markets, at this lower price point. But it is something that I've been talking about in a couple of my videos, talking about how Apple is changing to kind of hit a larger audience than usual. They have been expanding their iPhone lineup. Obviously, the iPhone 13 has 4 different phones you can choose from. It's rumored that the iPhone 14 will still have 4 different size phones that you can choose from. And we've also seen Apple keep older phones around in the lineup for longer periods of time. So if you look at the current lineup, you can get the iPhone SE for $400, you can get the iPhone 11 for $500, and that just keeps going up and up by like $100 increments. They got a pretty wide range of phones covering this entire lineup, even if they aren't necessarily hitting the market with a bunch of new phones every year. Kind of like Samsung does. Samsung, they have their flagship series, but they'll also release a ton of cheaper phones in their A series lineup. And basically, if you are going into the store looking for a Samsung phone and you have $200 in your pocket or $400 in your pocket or $1,000 in your pocket or hey, $1,300. They got you basically covered at every single price point that you would want to get a phone at. I mean, if you even look at their foldables, you can go up to like almost $2,000 on a phone. And historically, that has really not been Apple's game, at least in the iPhone lineup. Traditionally, they've had the one iPhone for everyone. Then people got kind of a little taken aback when they did the 5C. Some people like that one iPhone model. It's very simple, What's the best Apple phone to get? Well, they only sell one of them, so that's the best one. And as the lineup has expanded, people have been asking more questions about which iPhone is right for them, which size do they get, do they go for the Pro versions, or do they save a lot of money and go for one of these SE models? So that got me thinking, can Apple compete in this lower end market where traditionally there have been a lot of options for different Android phones, and Apple has just never competed in this market? There has literally been zero competition from really any other smartphone software vendor, and here comes Apple potentially making a $200 iPhone. And when you kind of hear it like that, that's the real shocking point, because Apple always has that stigma of being too expensive, that their products are overpriced and that normal, people can't afford them. Well, here we go. We get a $200 iPhone. Can that actually shake up the lower end of the market? Because if I look at some of the Android phones at the lower end of this market, they actually have some things going for them that this potential $200 iPhone SE wouldn't have. And that mostly has to do with the design of these phones and the size of their screen. So I think a lot of customers like a larger screen. We've seen that kind of play out over the years. It's one of the reasons why the iPhone 12 and 13 mini really didn't sell well, is because consumers are using these phones as their main devices, and most of them want to get the biggest screen possible in that device and also value things like longer battery life. Well, I can't really speak to the battery life of these Android phones because I haven't tested them, but if you look at the design of them, they look relatively new, especially if you compare them against what the iPhone SE looks like. They definitely look like they're part of this new design generation of trying to reduce bezels at all costs and then moving to either software buttons or a gesture-based navigation system. And they also have larger displays that are bigger than the iPhone SE's display. Don't forget, the iPhone SE has a 4.7-inch display, and we had customers not buying the iPhone mini, and that has a 5.4-inch display. So this display is, in modern terms, quite small on the iPhone SE. And like I said, I couldn't speak to battery life on these Android phones, but that's also another area where I kind of worry of Apple entering into this market, is that for me, and I get that I'm not everyone out there, I know I'm not the average user, I am a power user through and through, but for me, I could not make the iPhone SE battery life work for me. It just did not last that long. If I remember correctly, that battery life was less than my 12 mini, and I had battery life problems on the 12 mini as well. So for most people going into this phone, what do they really care about at this price point? And I think maybe people could stomach the older design if they're, maybe that's a benefit for them. If you have a lot of older users, they actually might be more used to that button design. They might not want to get the latest and greatest designs or have to learn anything new. And actually, maybe entering into that lower end $200 market could end up being surprisingly a strength for Apple with that older design. And in terms of performance, I think that's Apple's greatest strength here, because even though that A13 chip is now 2 chip generations behind, that is still a very, very competent chip from Apple, still has amazing power, and it is probably going to beat any of those lower end Android phones in terms of performance. So even though they have the dated design, even though they might not have the best battery life, and they might not have a large display with the iPhone SE, the one thing that Apple has here is the processing power by future-proofing that phone with an A13 chip. And you can assume that if you bought that iPhone SE, even though it's about 2 years old now, I would say you're at least going to get 3 more years of software updates for that phone, where if you were getting a $200 Android phone, it might be running an older version of Android, and who knows when or if you're actually going to get software updates to newer versions of Android. All right, so there's one thing I didn't mention yet that could really help Apple out in this lower end market, and I know you know what it is because you're all smart watching this. There's one word: ecosystem. The Apple ecosystem would be an incredibly strong lure for people who are looking at this lower end market, who want to jump into the Apple ecosystem. And it doesn't necessarily have to just be someone who's used Android their whole life and have just never considered an iPhone before, but it's probably more likely to come from people who are in families with a lot of iPhone users who maybe aren't the most technically savvy people in the world. Maybe they just want to get a cheap device that works. They aren't willing to spend over $200 for a phone, or they want to get it through one of their carrier promotions where they pay like $0 a month to use the service. And traditionally, their only option at that lower end market was to just get a budget Android phone. But if Apple releases a $200 iPhone, if you're in that family, all of a sudden you have a very strong argument to make that, hey, if you get this $200 iPhone SE, you could join in on this Apple ecosystem and you could benefit from things like iMessage, or if you have one of these Apple plans, one of these Apple family plans like Apple One or iCloud storage or sharing photos, all the trappings of the Apple ecosystem. You can now look at that family member and go, okay, I know you're not really into tech. I know traditionally you think Apple is expensive and you don't want to spend your money there. But look, Apple now has this $200 phone that is going to be a great phone. You're going to get updates. You're going to be able to do iMessage with the whole family. And that is a very compelling place for Apple to be at this point, especially now that we know that one of Apple's major goals is to grow their Apple services. And eventually they are going to run out of market share at the people at the top. They might be kind of close, honestly, to running out of that market share of people who can buy these more premium phones, and an untapped area where Apple has explored very little, especially with the iPhone, is that lower end market. And this iPhone SE, tied together with the Apple ecosystem, tied together with Apple services, I think can end up being a very compelling product. Honestly, this product has me kind of more excited, even though it's already here, right? This is just the existing iPhone SE at a lower starting price. It's already here. You can go buy it today for $400. But if it really does come in at $200, I think that's actually way more exciting than a refreshed iPhone SE with an A15 chip and 5G in it. Like, those just being the only upgrades for the iPhone SE, having the same design, still retailing at $400, I don't think really is going to move the needle for Apple. But them taking the existing iPhone SE and lowering it down to $200, that does have a chance for Apple to move the needle in the lower end market and to gain iOS market share. I'm really interested to see how this strategy plays out if it's true. The fact that you can go into a store and get a $200 iPhone, I think could potentially be a game changer. And it's kind of part of Tim Cook's growing strategy to introduce products at the lower end where maybe we didn't expect Apple to kind of play in that area. I look at products like the $329 iPad. I've been screaming from like the top of my lungs that is like one of the best deals in tech at $329. That iPad basically does almost everything you would want a tablet to do, and it is such a great deal that it's so easy to recommend. This isn't necessarily a great deal at this point, but the Apple Watch Series 3 being a $200 device is a pretty low-cost device for Apple. I think they should replace it at this point and put the Apple Watch SE at $200, but at one point, it was a pretty good deal. You also have Apple keeping around other products that you might have not expected them to keep around, like the original AirPods, which have moved lower into the lineup around that $100 price point. So this is Apple expanding into the lower area. I think we've seen this trend for a couple of years now. And the two areas where they really haven't introduced products in this area is the Mac, which I hope they are working on a lower cost Mac. I am all for that. And the iPhone. And the iPhone is the product that sells the most for them. It's what makes them the most money. It is their biggest hit of a product. And if we see a $200 iPhone, that is just going to be, the headlines will write themselves. Apple releases a $200 iPhone. It also means probably the death of the iPod Touch. That thing's still $200. So it has an A10 chip in it. It's very old. If Apple releases a $200 iPhone, no reason to keep around that old $200 iPod Touch. Kill two birds with one stone. All right. Again, these are just my thoughts on Apple potentially, again, this isn't confirmed yet, potentially releasing a $200 iPhone SE, and how I think it can actually shake up the market and get Apple more customers using an iPhone. If you agree with me, or you don't agree with me, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Let me know why you agree with me or why you disagree with me. And if you like the video, make sure to give me a like if you want to see more from the channel. See if this $200 iPhone SE actually comes out, and maybe I'll re-review it. Make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.